Hi, OG is here, sorry.
Okay. CO, are you here?
Closing of the session isn't complete. My team.
Okay.
Oh.
Opening up. BINUS A. Are you here? Yeah, you can go to the restroom. While waiting, please fill in your names in the chat on your speaking positions and your gender pronouns if you prefer. CGCO, please fill in your speaking positions and names and your gender pronouns if you prefer in the chat. Okay. Are we still waiting for the other CO member to reconnect? CO?
No, I'm already here.
Okay. Since everyone is here, debating on the second round of HBP 2020, debating on OG-ITB or BINUS A, CG, Taratang 2020, CO, the Overton window. Debating on the motion of as Pope Francis is how to would support the Italian law against homotransphobia. I will keep the timer on the share screen, but I hope that the debaters are also aware of their own times because I won't be clapping. So without further ado, to open this debate, I call Prime Minister to open the case for team opening government. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Let me. Okay. Let me start in 3, 2. Opening government stance upon Catholics to be more open and bringing core value of Catholicism on establishing the God kingdom. Homotransphobia is a disgusting manner in this world that even Jesus opposed from the very beginning. We're very proud to propose. Firstly, what is the actor that we're talking about in this case? We play as the scenario where we are Pope Francis. What Pope say is a true in the eye of Catholic followers because we see as the quote-unquote Wakil Tuhan or the Jesus in this work, for example, where we bring the core value that exists, what Jesus told us, for example. What does it look like? It looked like document coming from document church, for example, that always been passed and always been believable by a lot of society. It looked like the environment documentaries that exist, like Nosai Tate or something like that, that also against capitalism radicalism, for example, and those kind of things. We think that the support for the law against homotransphobia will also implement the same way upon this kind of church documentation, or even just in simple speech coming from Pope, for example, in the Christmas or something like that, where every day we impose this to our Catholic follower or even all around society. What is the stance in opening government? We support this kind of LGBT, the law against homotransphobia, and we think that what we support is not only the spreading of the religion in and of itself, but this debate also need to focus upon the spreading of religion, whether or not it's bring the good or the core value in and of itself, because we think that as a Pope, we also value the value of Catholicism and the value of religion ourselves. It's very much right. So with that in mind, I have two substantive. First, why it is actually within the interest of Pope Francis into two layers. One, what Pope Francis already established in the past and right now. Secondly, why it is actually good for our Catholicism to advance even further. Second idea is upon why it is actually inside the religion morality as the core value of our religion, that is Catholic, in the very first place. With that in mind, first idea, why it is within the interest of Pope Francis. Firstly, what Pope Francis has established right now, two things. One, Pope Francis already admit a lot of gay lobbying exists in this kind of church and this kind of Vatican, for example, so on and so forth. Even the establishment, before Pope Francis actually being selected by Pope in and of itself, he's already established himself as a person that open to LGBT people, for example, open to the progressiveness that is exists, by saying that they deserve also life, for example, so on and so forth. Even documentation coming, church document that coming from Pope Francis, for example, already being established upon the openness, about the progressivity, upon this kind of changes and value, for example. Also, note that even though the opposition want to claim that Catholics is inherently conservative, for example, I will tackle it later, but first just in mind, note that Pope Benedict surely is a very conservative person. But note that when Pope Benedict is actually being chosen, Pope Francis already do a lot of lobbying and talk with Pope Benedict, talking about the openness for queer, for example, when he already show a lot of progressivity, even inside the talk and the discussion upon this kind of Vatican Council. Pope Francis already is being saw as a progressive person in and of itself. With that in mind, meaning that Pope Francis always want to pass a more progressive policy in and of itself, meaning that the support for the law against transphobia is something that is necessary in line with this kind of with the Pope Francis value from very beginning. Secondly, why it is actually good for religion. Not what happened after this, not what happened in the status quo, is that what Catholicism wants is two things. One, more follower, and two, break down the two conservative idea that have existed too long. Not that people in the status quo start to become more progressive, and most Catholics also followers also have the same interest. Why is that the case? Not that there are a lot of side B Christian all around the world, for example, or even more open queer person that's access in the Catholic Church in and of itself. Note also that long time Catholics has been portrayed as a conservative religion where they reject this kind of LGBT idea. This is why a lot of people, a lot of queer and openly LGBT people eventually leave this kind of Catholic idea and into a far more progressive religion, like GBI or other LGBT churches that far more open than Catholics, for example, so on and so forth. This kind of trend in the status quo give the urgency for Pope to make a more progressive idea upon making sure that follower is still exists in our world. What is the trade-off in our world? Opposition will defend conservative Catholic person, right? Those three things. One, they will not leave anyway, because most of the time, this kind of conservative Catholics already believing and value this kind of Catholicism so much when they are not going to leave anyway, because the only one that accommodate this quote-unquote conservatism is just this kind of Catholic Church from the very beginning, meaning that they will not leave anyway. Secondly, it will open up after this, open up the value coming from this kind of LGBT protection, so on and so forth. Because for far too long, Catholicism and this kind of Pope in the past just justifying the narrative that, okay, we reject LGBT, so on and so forth. The problem it is that this kind of followers is not opening up to the progression that exists. We as a Pope, meaning that what we say is something that we claim as a truth that also being brought by Jesus, for example, so on and so forth. Meaning that we can portray it as if this kind of conservative people will eventually just accept it anyway. Thirdly, about the opposement coming from Italian bishop is something that is not significant anyway, right? Because what Pope say is something that is true. The long of process, like Pope must be a cleric and then a bishop and then become Pope, for example, is something that everyone see as someone that is far more understand about the Catholic value, of understand about what Jesus and God claim about hukum kasih or something like that, love and open for everyone, so on and so forth. Meaning that if we're talking about progression, it is very likely to exist. Sure, POI.
Would you change the catechism and the holy sacraments just because young people like it more and it would attract more followers?
Look, Catholicism and those kind of thing is something that is sacred and those kind of thing. We think that it is have no incentive whatsoever to actually just change it, because we think that what they said about, oh, young people far more love about this kind of thing. We don't think that is the core value that we're talking about, but rather the core value that we're talking about is what kind of value that being imposed to everyone, about what kind of acceptance, what kind of Jesus talking about. Because if we're talking about Catholicism and how you default, for example, is something that's pretty much different and not actually include this debate, right? Secondly, religion, morality, why it is in line with the value of Catholicism. Note that Catholic and Bible always been supporting LGBT value. If opposition want to say, look, Catholic always been opposing this kind of thing. No, it's actually don't. They actually oppose this kind of LGBT value. It's because of the traditional value that men must love woman, for example, that being believed by tons of the society, so on and so forth. Meaning that in and of itself, in the Bible or those kind of thing, they not actually explicitly support this kind of conservative value at the end of the day. What Catholicism actually promoting and actually being in a core value is two things. One, apostolic, about based on love value, upon openness and solvency to all people that exist on earth. Meaning that when we support this kind of LGBT against homotransphobic narrative, meaning that we also support our core value, that is openness and the solvency for all other people. Even the meaning of Catholics in and of itself is something that also means open to everyone. The saviourship of Jesus is not limited to your gender or your sexuality, for example. What is important is that you believe that Jesus is your God, so on and so forth. Meaning that even in the core value in and of itself is something that is not backlashing with our value. That is, Bible in and of itself is not something that opposing the LGBT idea, so on and so forth. Jesus helping you, Jesus is your savior, is something that's been promoted from Catholicism at the very beginning of the era. With that in mind, the OG claims prove to you upon two things. This is the interest of Pope Francis upon progressing far more progressive agenda. Secondly, it's also good for religion morality. We're very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that fine speech. To open the case for team opening up, I call leader of up. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that we should protect all people despite their sex orientation, but we believe that not by supporting this law. Understanding that we actually don't care if the policy pass or not, but we just don't want to be seen as the people who are as the person who is supporting the advancement of LGBT value. Understanding that Pope Francais' interest is that to uphold the traditional value of the traditional value exists in the Bible, we believe that if we support this law, it will just go against our stance. So yeah. Coming to our substantive materials, we're going to talk about why supporting this law is actually against the interest of Pope Francais. Because firstly, we have to understand the characterization of Catholic people. Because the Catholic people really want to keep the old tradition all tradition value exist in the Bible. Like for example, doing misa, that's always follow the traditional procedures. Even if the Pope Franchise won't support, actually Pope is not against any sexual orientation. It's actually we are actually open to any sexual orientation, but we just don't want to endorse ourselves to supporting this homophobic, to supporting to supporting transgender, because understanding that Catholic followers are just not ready to accept new value that's different from what's been already taught from a long time. If we force them to accept the fact that Catholic is open, like the government have already explained before, where we tell them we believe that the Catholic followers are just not ready to accept the new value. And in their side of the house, if they keep endorsing the law, it will against your own teaching, where we've been told the same-sex marriage is prohibited, transforming your gender into the other gender is prohibited. And so in our side of the house, we will not against any kind of sexual orientation, but we won't support this transforming this transgender either. I believe that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of All, for that fine speech. To extend the case for team opening Gov, I call Deputy Prime Minister here.
Test, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1. So basically, Leader of Opposition did not bring any case at all. I'm gonna integrate it into my third clash. I'm gonna bring 3 arguments. Also, it's very disappointing for Leader of Opposition to literally neglect all of Hans' explanation. I'm going to tell you why that's specifically important and why closing does not have any room to actually explain, and why all of the principal argument has already brought by OG, right? 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to talk to you about the global trend, why the global Catholic trend are most likely going to be benefited by this movement of, the movement of Pope Francis. Number 2, I'm going to talk about the principle of like you being Pope means that you want to be a law-abiding citizen, and you want to, for example, you want to be a law-abiding citizen and what qualities that you need to actually have. Lastly, thirdly, I'm going to talk about the new prophecy and old prophecy. This is a principal argument in which that I'm going to talk about what are the things that are anti-gay that are in Catholicism, and why Catholicism does not use that principle at all. So opening opposition cannot say that, what if there is a new aliran or things like that, right? Okay, first things first, my extension. What I'm going to tell you is that, okay, Hans already told you, like, for example, why specifically it'll be better like in Italy, for example, but I'm going to tell you about the global trend, right? Look, even though there are a lot of bad things happening in the world, the global trend is that there are a lot of people accepting trans and gay people. It's not necessarily that they are advocates for gay marriage, like it's not there yet, but at the very least, these people are, for example, wanting to advocate the basic safety of these kind of trans and gay people, right? A lot of the times there are a lot of, activism that are in Indonesia that protects trans women, for example, even though they're religious, but they don't want, for example, trans women to be killed, right? So there is a global trend of progressivity. For example, also in Thailand and Taiwan, recently gay marriage has already been, legalized, for example. But like what I'm trying to say is that what Pope Francis will do in Italy, for example, it will definitely be better for the global Catholicism. Why is that so? Two reasons. Number one, inclusivity. So a lot of the times there are a lot of people also that are intersection, right? For example, they are queer, but they want to adhere to a religion, right? Pope Francis gives them the opportunity for them to do that, but still remains the core value of it, right? I'm going to talk to you in later arguments why the core value of Christianity is still needs to actually protect LGBT and trans movement. So inclusivity is really important. A lot of queer people are really, stressed out because they actually believe in Jesus, but they feel like Jesus are opposing them because they practice gay sex, for example, etc. We think that inclusivity is really important for us to, spread this kind of message and include people in our religion. But second benefit is also that what I'm going to say is that it actually it actually brings much more progress, and it actually, like for example, aspire towards many nations in the world, right? Because Pope Francis has a history of going out the world. His influence is really, really big, for example, and we think that it allows, like for example, other progressivity in other religions to actually happen. We think that it's much better for us and Pope Francis, since Pope Francis has, like for example, a big message and a big power. This is the right momentum to do, and the global trend fits for it, right? Second of all, this directly clashes to opening opposition, right? Opening opposition said that if Pope Francis do this, it means that Pope Francis does not adhere to the law. I have two responses to this, and this is definitely the explanation of second argument, right? Number one, there is a law of anti-hate speech. There is a law about hate speech, right? We think that if you are going to, for example, attack minorities, that it means that you are actually practicing hate speech, right? So in opening opposition, they are the one who are practicing hate speech. You are the one who are, for example, being a pope and not being a law-abiding citizen. Under our side, you are actually being a law-abiding citizen, because at the end of the day, you are a pope and you are actually protecting minorities to be attacked. So under your side, Pope does not adhere to a core value. Pope does not protect the minority, and Pope does hate speech. That is the harm under opening opposition, right? Lastly, I'm going to talk about the law explanation about, like, for example, the principle of Christianity. I hope you get this from her speech, but I'm going to extend to that. Okay, so basically, there are some verses that are, for example, like anti-gay, right? For example, there are a verse in old prophecy that says that if two men sleeping together, it means that you are going to it means that it is banned, right? Two men cannot sleep together. But that is old prophecy. The Catholic that we are happening right now, and the trend that Pope Francis is actually directing and shifting, is that to a new prophecy, because there are a lot of things that are in the old prophecy that are, being the core values that are being left out, right? So that is the trend of Catholicism, and that is the trend of what Pope Francis did right now in the world. Opposition needs to explain why, at the end of the day, those old prophecy are still relevant, one, but number two, why does it fit, Pope Francis and what Pope Francis directly want, right? Because they cannot lie, see it in the news. Pope Francis literally are, favoring for a Catholicism that are, adhering to the new prophecy, right? So the new prophecy contains things like, for example, protecting other people, protecting minorities. It definitely fits to this, right? Because you don't necessarily have, like, for example, anti-gay sentiments, or you don't necessarily have minority sentiments in the new prophecy that Pope Francis are actually adhering right now. So at the end of the day, these kind of things are really crucial for us to do. Okay, more things on that. A lot of the times in Catholicism, there are a lot of basic principles, and there are a lot of sayings that are not explicit. For example, in danger, protect the who are like poor, for example. Like, that's the basic of all religion. We think that at the end of the day, all of these like implicit things of the Bible will definitely be transcends towards Pope Francis' message if he wants to, for example, advocate for the minorities, right? Why is that so? Two things. Number one, because at the end of the day, a lot of the times people misread religions, right? People are confused with religions because it has a lot of rules, but it's really simple. What's the simplicity about religion is that what you need to do good and you need to protect others. You cannot be racist, for example, etc. Right? You need to do good to others. So at the end of the day, if Pope Francis does this, most likely he will inspire, for example, other people to actually do the same, and more people, for example, to actually protect these trans and queer minorities at the end of the day. But secondly, I think that it will garner support from, like, for example, progressive people who are rich. Like, a lot of donations can come from that. A lot of like supports and social medias, for example, can come from that. Since Europe is full, action that Pope Francis will do will lead into a lot like benefits, right? We can see there, for example, like backlashes, right? For example, from the conservative Catholicism. But there is one big excuse why that can happen. Not adhere to the core value of Christianity. What you need to have as a religion is that as long as it adheres to the core values of Christianity, Catholicism, and as long as you can definitely market it as well as possible, you can have more followers, right? We believe that. We take this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for the fine speech. To extend the case for team opening up, I call Deputy Leader of UP. Here.
One second. We think that this debate talks specifically about Catholicism as a religion, right? So what are the inherent characteristics of Catholicism? As a gay individual that was Catholic and was in a high school of Catholic sisters, I can say that it is very, very strict. That is to say, it is very conservative. It cannot change even with the progressive trends that is happening, right? That is to say, we are adhering to previous traditions that even through the mass, we cannot change the catechism, the procedure of the mass for decades or for centuries, right? That is to say that in the Bible, the new prophecy says that, well, you cannot lay, and the old prophecy says that you cannot lay with another man, and the new prophecy say that not one word of Torah will actually be erased, and you need to follow all of that, right? That is to say, we say that this form of interpretation, whether or not this is true or not, is not actually important, but I think that a lot of Catholics actually subscribe and adhere to this form of interpretation. So even if this is not correct, as long as people actually believe this, I'm going to prove to you why it's more important to actually cater to our current religious followers base that already adhere to this religion. And I'm going to prove you, even if the Pope is powerful, it's not that powerful enough to actually change everything, something that is so fundamental, right? Okay, so they say that the Pope is very, very powerful, right? They say that the Pope is absolute and the wakil of God and can actually change everything. Number one, we think that this assertion is false. There are a lot of precedents where the Pope is actually being undermined. We can even track back to the moment where Peter was the first Pope, and Paul actually goes against Peter, and in a lot of council of the disciples, right? That is to say, Paul actually promotes inclusivity towards the Greeks and towards other people that are not Israelites. And the Peter actually loses to the influence to Paul. This actually proves to you that there are a lot of precedences when the Pope is seen as someone that is strong. There are a lot of factions that can actually overthrow the Pope, right? Or we say that the year of the 5 popes. There are a lot of cases where popes are actually undermined. Number two, these popes are actually having political influence, but the current pope, the Pope Francis, doesn't actually have that much political influence. We see that this makes Francis even more vulnerable to other opposition within the church, right? That is to say, they don't actually have more power and more influence towards the people, and there are a lot of alternatives that are more progressive and more conservative, right? That is to say, the religiosity doesn't actually play that much part on you anymore, right? That is to say that Pope Francis has a lot of power to actually be undermined by other religious leaders or even by political leaders and stuff. So we say that you are not absolute, and as Pope Francis, you want to actually keep your image as the leader of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is very big. You are most likely going to want to do everything in your power to actually keep your image and not actually losing and getting undermined, or even in the worst case scenario, to actually get overthrown by other factions within it, right? Okay, so the answer to my POI was they will not change catechism and sacraments because they are sacred, right? We think that this means that you are unlikely to actually change something that is sacred, regardless of whether you get more followers or you get like more progressivity, right? Because understand that catechism are also very sexist. That is to say, we don't allow like female pastor, we don't allow like we don't allow like female putra altar to actually go to the altar, right? We think that this means that if I prove to you that this verse is also sacred to a lot of people and it gives salvation to people, their principle actually falls, that we are not obligated to actually change, right? So what do I tell you then? So what will I tell you? They say that Pope Francis has already opened the discussion on progressive policy, so we are not backlashing anything. First, we think that this is false, right? You are only skewing what Pope Francis actually said. What Pope Francis actually said, he apologized for the extreme persecution to the gay people in old era that is caused by the Catholic Church. He apologized for the killings. He apologized for the crucifixion. He apologized for the burning of gay people, right? That is to say, he is against crimes against humanity, but he does not support or endorse LGBT movements in any scenario. He never actually proves this, and he never actually like say that it's okay for you to be gay, right? And number two, he actively advocates against their followers to do gay sex. That is to say, your sexual orientation is something, but you need to actually refrain yourself from being gay, from doing gay sex, right? Because it is that exact intercourse that is restricted. We say that this means Pope Francis is actually more open and more progressive than Benedict, but there's some line that cannot be crossed as long as you are the Pope of the Catholic Church. Why is this the case, right? Let's talk about the practical implication and the followers analysis. What kind of followers are we talking about? If they want to talk about young people, we say that young people are out of our market regardless. Exactly, a lot of other the Swedish, the Protestant churches or the Reformed churches are far more progressive than us. Exactly, they can actually change in the snap of the eyes. Exactly, because why? Because they cater to a specific followers base that is very, very specific. For example, young people in Stockholm, this Church of Sweden, it's their only actual voter base, right? That is to say, we are not talking about young people because it is very easy to actually sway them. Because it's not only on LGBT movements that we are behind. We are behind in everything. We are behind the Protestant churches that actually uses a lot of fun musics and dancing in their mass, right? We cannot actually have that without actually backlashing our core value of catechism. We cannot actually add a lot of female press without actually backlashing our value, right? That is to say, it is futile for us to actually compete with young people. They will never go to religion, right, to Catholicism as a religion. We say that it's weird, right? If Hindi wants to say that there are a lot of gay people that wants to go to church, well, I will go to church in Tamrin that is actually accepting to me, not Catholicism. I will not believe the Pope just because. And I can also have more fun mass than in Catholic mass that is 2 hours and it's very, very boring, right? So number two, what kind of people we should cater to? These are exactly old people that already adhere to the mass. They go to mass every day. My aunt actually go there every day at 6 a.m. every morning. These kind of things are very, very important. And these sermons that they actually hear in the mass are very important. Regardless of the actual harm, we say that the actual harm is not that big. My aunt is not going to harass every gay individuals in the street, but actually hearing her pastors talking about anti-gay stuff is going to be very important for her. Why? Exactly because this is something that has been taught again and again. These are traditions. These people are very colored. These are people that love tradition so much. We think that you are abandoning your core people that you should cater to. We say that there are a lot of other ways to gain gender equality, and we don't actually against the law actually passing, but we are against the Pope actively endorsing it.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Up, for that speech. To open the case for the closing half, I call Member of Government. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panels, what's been missing from the opening debate is there is no characterization and also context. How would like the followers would behave as a response toward Pope Francis' statement whether or not he will support the transphobia, the law against transphobia law. But also important that's been missing in the opening debate is there is no importance like why it is so important to maintain the followers and which followers that we would like to maintain. But thirdly, regardless of the consequence toward Pope Francis, whether people will backlash or not, why we as a Pope Francis, it is important to still stick towards the core value of Catholic that I would like to clarify what is the truest value of Catholicism. So that's the argument that I would like to draw. All of my rebuttals would be integrated towards my arguments, but before that, I think there needs to be clarification as Pope Francis that what we would like to do. So what does we mean as support? Support means that we will translate this law against transphobia also into encyclic in Catholic. So this will create a direct order for bishops and also reverends all around the world not to be able to discriminate further for the transphobia because we're supporting the law against transphobia. But not to mention all the donation in itself that we maintain as a Vatican, we also will allocate some that is consistent but what like has been taught in the context. We will not only give it to the sex work, the victim of sex worker, but we would like also to give this donation to the victim of transphobia that is discriminated in society right now. I think that is, can you hear me? Okay. So that I think that is important. I think that is important models that would be beneficial towards all the Catholic. Now, going to my first arguments regarding why we need to take active stance as a response towards the opposition, because opposition said it's okay. We might like closetedly like support them, but we shouldn't take any action. But no, that's bad. Because what? Because if we as a Pope Francis, when we always take the pragmatic stance, exactly what happened is like what's the reverend and also this bishop who have like this conservative and old-fashioned thinking of way will still discriminate against the transphobia, and people will still think that it's not okay to be gay or to be LGBT or to be transphobia. So that's why discrimination and also mistreatment towards this individual will happen more and more. But we, as a Pope Francis, if we take active steps and translate it into encyclic, this will create a direct order that you, as Catholic individuals, can no longer do this. So even if they do not agree, but we have the authority because they still want to be a good congregation that follows the Pope Francis word. But also, if you say that this will backlash, like actually people do not want to listen to Pope Francis anymore. No, we don't think so, because Pope Francis actually already controversial statement back then when he said that who are we to judge these LGBT people? But people do not believe Catholic churches anyway, but they just fashion it. So that's why we think that's okay. Going to my second argument, why it is so important?
About that.
To what segment that we need to cater to, and also why it is so important, because it's quite confusing on the opening. So here is the thing. Who is Catholic? Who is the Catholic congregation right now? Actually, it consists of older individuals. We agree to that. But if you realize, older individuals, like it or not, they are declining because one day they will die. I mean, like, I hate that, but that's the reality. So if you do not able to maintain this younger generation and you always stick to the older generation, what will happen is you will lose the power of the donation, because the donation in itself that collected by the mass, it is important to still maintain Pope Francis' agenda, because as Pope Francis you have like multiple agenda. You need to have like a lot of building schools, for example, or to have like other poor people that can be done if you do not stay relevant if you do not stay relevant. But also, secondly, if you stay silent, that means that currently people's like that is actually like closeted previously wants have more incentive to live Catholic churches more and more, right? And they will move to the other. So even if right now the trend is because of the trend right now, people are more liberated. Exactly, it's more important
for us to make a congregation because the context of defining population that never brought by the opening government. But plays to this argument, if then like opposition said it's not possible because it's not possible for these other individuals to like accepting, but no, other individuals have more reliance towards religion and also Catholic because this is the way of their life and they have been loyal and they are more afraid to go to the hell rather than like supporting this because if they leave the religion they will directly go to hell. Okay, so that's why they won't leave. But it is also but it is also possible for younger individuals like right now, even if like there is also conservative younger individuals, on the prophecy why LGBT was condemned, it's because the narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah. But Sodom and Gomorrah actually condemned because they held a sex party, not because they are LGBT. So once we're able to clarify, which is a make sense narrative towards these younger individuals, they're able to accept them also. Okay, so that's why important for us to maintain the congregation. Going to my second argument, why we ask for Francais regardless of the consequence, whether there is backlash or whether like our population will be like declining whatsoever, it is still important for us to do what's right. Because the core value of Catholic is actually forgiveness. There is a lot of prophecy that already been told in the Bible. Like, for example, Jesus always forgive the humans that judge him, which is Pharisee. He also be very kind to the sex worker, which is Maria Magdalene. It shows you the truest value of Catholicism is actually forgiveness. That even if you did mistake, you need to forgive them and be kind to them. So that's why it is important for us as Catholic, even if, like for example, regardless being gay is wrong, is right or not, but you still forgive them. You give comfort to them, being inside religion. Follow even if you're gay, you're able to be in Catholic, which is giving comfort and you're able to enrich your spiritual journey. That is, I think, the most important obligation as Pope Francis, not only to support and also to defend the most vulnerable actor, but also able to enrich this individual's journey and not letting them be feeling that are discriminated by something that's supposed to be close to them. For that, we're very proud back to propose.
Thank you, Member of Government, for that speech. To extend the case for the closing halt for the opposition bench, I call Member of Opposition here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay. Three, two, one. The problem of the other three benches is they talk about the global trends of Catholic Church and Pope to become inclusive and accepting towards LGBT. Being kind, being embracing is always a good thing. As much as I want to believe that the world is that utopic that once Pope said something nice, everyone would believe and follow that order, like what CG said, I think this is wrong for two observations. The first observation is if the society paradigm is that embracing and accepting to the LGBT people, without Pope said the support of anti-transphobia law, the law will be passed anyway because society already that accepting. Therefore, OG and CG will have no urgency at all. But the second observation is the real comparative here is needed to play in a real scenario where backlash exists, and I'm going to tell you that why the backlash will be exponentially massive. What is context from CO is true, because I'm going to be the first thing in this debate that after the half hour that the debate has been passed to explain that the political and ideological spectrum and composition of Italian society and the current rising distrust against Pope in the Vatican, Rome, and how the explicit support against transphobia will divide the Vatican Catholic institution. The migrants' rights and climate changes, which
Yo,
gave more action and more benefit to more people on the ground. So I'm going to explain the backlash against Pope for 3 reasons. So if I can successfully prove you this, their argument talking about more help towards LGBT people will not be flying at all. The first reason is because OGs trying to talk about the global trends of society become more liberal. But we talk about the Italy as a nation. In the most recent election, society, the right-wing party, which is the Five-Star Movement, gets 40% of the total votes. And the center-right political party, which also coalesces with the right party, also gets 35%, and they coalesce to like oppose more LGBT rights. Society more conservative, traditional interpretations of the Bible that marriage is also and still exclusively about men and women. But the second reason is because the idea of marriage between man and woman are still believed by many of the society on the ground. Like this deserve to help, for example, associations with the script of instead of Pope as the God representative, because the traditional belief, because of the parental teaching that's still conservative, because the that scapegoats of the social problems into the minority. But the third and most important reason is because Pope Francis, the world, Francis is the is not even an Italian-born individual. He was born in Argentina, and he is the first non-European Jesuit Pope in the modern times. Even in the last Pope voting, more than quarters of the cardinals believe that Pope is unfit for his job, and and his identity is not representative towards Italy and the Vatican culture. What is the conclusion of these 3 reasons? Even when Pope said that you need to pass this anti-transphobia law, like what OG and CG said, this will not materialize into many of bishops, cardinals, and archbishops on the ground. Their benefit is marginal. But second is, more fragmentation is going to be existing on their side of the house, because the cardinals now, that in the last voting, are rejecting the idea of Pope being more liberal, now have more political and religious weapons to galvanize support from other cardinals that remains conservative, or at least in the gray area, saying that Pope has been destroyed of marriage that Catholic has been holding for so long. So with this narrative, emboldened with the idea of Pope is non-Italian person, he is a foreign person coming from Argentina that wants to bring his foreign Argentinian gay value, for example, this will become massive and fragmentation. Pope will not be excommunicated. I know Pope will not be fired, will not be impeached, but this fragmentation already creates such huge mass, because society is going to be confused upon who they want to follow, and there's going to be more attack towards LGBT people on the ground that they believe need to be retaliated after they get support from the Pope that they distrust. Second, how about the rights of LGBT people? This is the framing of CO that's important. Pope cannot give safe space to everyone. If Pope gives safe space to minority will be offended. If Pope gives safe space to its minority, majority will be offended. There is no win-win situation. But the of Pope needs to give the protection to majority more, because to of contribution. Majority, which are still quite conservative, are the most contributive parts of Catholic institution. They are the one that give one persembahan, that go to Sundays churches, that proselytize their religion, and to have more say in the way Pope is going to conduct his conservative belief. And second, in the idea of vulnerability. Sure, I don't deny that LGBT is vulnerable, but they still have any other outlet, like support groups, friends, LGBT shelters, and to the fact that OG said there is still rich people that still go, they are not the vulnerable one. To the fact that able to coming out in the really just the today's consideration. But for the true conservative Catholic individuals, they don't have any other outlet to channel their private connection with their God, and they will be so offended if they believe that their value of religion has been infiltrated with liberal belief that Pope is arbitrarily bringing, and it will create more fragmentation that will hamper their spiritual salvation because they don't know what to follow. You are going to harm the majority that we need to protect. But even when you talk about social issue, I think more importantly, we need to talk about migrant issue, economic inequality, and climate action. Because you LGBT because more people are issue. Because people migrant issue and climate changes that are going to get the most benefit only in CO side of the house. I'm so happy to oppose.
Thank you, Member of OP, for that fine speech. To conclude the case for Team Gov, I call Government Whip. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, bye-bye, yeah. So I'll start in 3, 2, 1. 2 problems with COCs. Number 1, we ask Pope Francis. So I don't know what is the relevance of Pope Francis suddenly talking about climate change, refugees, and whatnot, even though we've already and also in the present, and we're still doing all of those campaigns. Number 2, the fact that if they say, hey, LGBT still have support groups, movements, that means that climate change, refugee law, and poverty can also take a back seat because they have larger platforms to protect the marginalized people because they're refugees or because they're, for example, victims of natural disasters compared to when you're someone being actively discriminated because you're a trans person or a gay person, right? So we don't see any relevance in this. Number 2, even if, let's say, they successfully implement the traction thing and then they garner all of the support coming from Pope Francis, what are they going to do that for, right? Because we've never seen what kind of people they want to support in the first place. If Pope Francis is going to support if they're going to support the very conservative community, they're going to die off anyway, like what Kario said, or have very little power because there is only a few of them left, right? If you're going to do that, going to lose, no thank you, I'll not be taking any POIs. You're going to lose support from the progressive people as well. So I don't know how that's going to benefit the congregation at the end of the day. I have 2 issues I want to talk about in my speech. Number 1, I'm going to contextualize the bill towards the Pope's interest because I don't think anyone actually explained, any other teams actually explained against that, except on his idea for forgiveness. But I'm also going to talk about why supporting the new draft or at least it's worth fighting for. So why do I want to contextualize the bill? Because the problem in the opening debate is that it's an argument supporting LGBT as it has nothing with the bill itself, right? But what is Kario trying to talk to you in his substantive speech? He talks about the value of love and forgiveness, which already, of course, has already been brought by OG, but they never contextualize it in the bill, right? The idea of love and forgiveness means that you need to give comfort towards the people. And this is very important because if it is for them to gain this from us, it means that we are sinning as people when we discriminate against the trans people and the gays, right? So the idea of the added punishment within the bill is in line with the Pope's beliefs. So for example, if you are attacking people based on their identity, not only are you sinning because you are spreading hate, but you're also sinning against the people you are supposed to love for something that is, for example, beyond their control, or because you feel you are more righteous. So even in essence, the sin is doubled, right? So you can have the added punishment, and that's why Pope Francis should support the bill. What if we remain silent? In the status quo, you have so much to lose, right? The bigoted bishops in the first place in Italy have given platform for homophobes to actually discriminate discriminate against the gays and the trans people. So that means even right now, they are facing a lot of open discrimination, a lot of narratives turned against them. And that's why we want the donation to be there. And that's why we want the cyclical letters to be there, actively condemning all of the things these bishops have done, right? Even if you want to say that, hey, it's enough for you to do the cyclical letters, why do you have to openly support this bill? Because it is done by the bishops, right? By the bishops in Italy. And we say if you want to compensate for them, if it's okay to apologize, as what OO has already stated, you have to apologize and make amends in proportion to the harms that you have done. If the Catholic Church is the single largest entity that is trying to gain, that is oppressing these minority groups, that means we also have to give the biggest form of compensation and protection against them. No one has touched these ideas in the opening debate, right? So even if, let's say, our mechanism is really agile, or we will go that actively, and Pope Francis is still doing his interest in the very first place. Second part, why supporting the new draft bill will create change? Because it's in line with the interest for radical progressive agenda brought by Pope Francis, right? I'm going to talk about the authority dynamics. It's important because it proves that people can change, right? Give you 2 lines of logic. Number 1, that the present narratives can be larger than the past mistakes. Number 2, that the Pope is actively more powerful than the bishops. What does this mean? A lot of times, people of gay people, they're afraid of going to hell, and they're afraid to support gay people because they think that actively supporting gay people will make them go to hell. That's why they discriminate against the gay people, because they think in doing so, they're doing something right, and God wants me to do this. That's why I'm going to heaven, right? When the Pope stops this narrative and says, even though you don't agree with them, I don't care. I actually care for the gay people, and you discriminate against them, that means you're going to hell. That means I want to punish you as well, and I'm doing it through my support to the bill. It means that the people are going to be scared because they know that the Pope is no longer backing them up. The narrative is now different. But why are they still and most probably staying silent? Because it's still the narrative coming from the local bishops, right? But the thing is, Catholic people are also afraid of authoritative figures. That's why they fear the bishops. If the Pope adamantly requires this bill to be drafted and put in implementation, that means the Pope can garner all of the cyclical letters and make the ultimate move to cement his sentiment and support towards the LGBT communities, right? The power comes from the Pope and the platform he gives, because he's going to give all of the, for example, Bible verses to argue for the bill to be implemented. He's going to inspire a lot of people from other countries as well to speak up on these sentiments. And that means a lot of people that are bigots in Italy are going to be silenced, and they're going to fear for the fact that the money is going to be taken away from them if they do not comply with the Pope's wishes and still discriminate against the people, right? Even if they don't change their minds, at most they're going to stay silent because they might be confused, or they might not want to take a stance because they're afraid of sinning and going to hell. This is still beneficial for us. Why? Because there will be no more conflict and protest towards the drafting of the bill. In the status quo, a lot of times bills get stopped in the process because people demonstrate against them. But right now, the bill is going to be drafted, and we're doing active measures to ensure protection can still happen, even if it's sometimes out of our hands, right? Even if the bill fails, at the very least, we have compensation to how the church was so evil to LGBT people, both in the present and in the past. And we're going to mitigate the backlash from the LGBT community that are still happening right now, right? Because when people are demonstrating to support the bill, they get the backlash from society. So at the very least, if all else fails, we're going to give you the proof that we can use this to protect them. We're going to have witness protection programs. We're going to give them money when they're thrown out of the house, unlike what the US did when the gay marriage was legalized. We're going to give you better protection, and that's the manifestation of religion. That is the main goal of Pope Francis and his agenda throughout his reigning career. That's why we're very proud to propose.
Thank you, Garwantwe, for that speech. To conclude the case for Team Up and the debate as a whole, I call Opposition Whip. Hear, hear.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Setting up the timer. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. I like the way closing government ran away to my member explanation by only saying, oh, their case is not relevant. 3 problems. Number 1, I don't know why they assume all refugee, all poor people is always unfaithful individual. They provide no likelihood on this. Second, when you talk about this constituent and become relevant, their policy apply to all LGBT in Italia, in which not all LGBT always faithful to your belief. So they also not relevant at some extent. Last response, when they say climate change and poverty issue has another platform, one, LGBT also do the same thing, but second, I don't think so. Before in Italia, rich weak everywhere, right everywhere. Corporate exploitation is everywhere and dominate the political sector. So the comparative would be, in closing opposition, at least you as Pope, you can save poor and also refugee. In closing government, you save nothing. Because now everyone against you, all of your statement means nothing without any implementation. My issue. The only thing that you need to appreciate from opening government is their framing. Saying about how Pope is the right hand of God. They are a symbol of Catholic. By that consequences, you need to in line with the majority of follower and your believer on the ground, irrespective the ideology, because you are the symbol of the religion. Three things. One, I don't think it is morally to you give super power to Pope and let him to exercise their personal idea and perspective to represent the whole community. This is something that is immoral. But second, they also forget the fact that in Italia, the conservatism will always dominate in everywhere. Conservative wins in a politics. Conservative win in social discussion, in offline and also online discussion. This is why our identity in closing opposition about following majority is the important characterization in the debate. Lastly, also that you need thing that you need to note is that do not believe with the opening government and closing government framing saying Catholic, new Catholic is always progressive, the old one is always conservative. When this is true, when Catholic intrinsically progressive, I don't think we need to debate about this motion. When it is true, then the true Catholic is about protecting LGBT. I don't think why local bishop, local priest, local church oppose the policy. So do not let this framing makes them and makes you as a adjudicator thinking that they can run away from the burden, saying, what if backlash happen? I don't want to accept any POI, sorry. What if backlash happen exponentially as a Pope? Why then it's okay? This is where closing opposition gives better explanation. First contribution in closing opposition. Closing opposition is the one who provides you the truest context in this Pope currently face. My member told you that currently Pope in a position of being trusted by Catholic, by Cardinal, by local churches and local priests around in Italia, even to the extent of political spectrum. Why the context establishment is pretty much important in the debate? For reasons. Number one, it means that the argument from opening government saying trend and also the new Catholic is not convincing. But second of all, it gives better ground of explanation because opening opposition provides you any reason of to back up their claim. Third of all, it means that when opening government want to become inclusive, the way to become inclusive exactly following the conservative majority. So we also take the inclusive benefit and opening government. Fourthly, it also takes the closing government contribution about young people and donation because young people more likely follow their parent, more likely follow the conservative dominant area in that sense. Second contribution in closing opposition. We want to make the debate become more personal because we talk about in a perspective of Pope. When we talk about Pope, we as liberal people love the Pope. When we talk about Italian citizens, they do not like Pope at all because this Pope is too liberal for them. They are anti-climate change, they are anti-poverty, for example. That's why my member explanation is important because you do not need to take radical extension and radical move because it makes you become more unbelievable, become vulnerable in a political leverage in Italia. So why this argument also important? The output of becoming unbelievable Pope exactly impactful to some individual. One, now you cannot protect the poor. You cannot express your anti-poverty statement and anti-exploitation to company because now your political opponent can say, hey, do not believe on those homosexual foreign people. But second, you also have to promote about anti-climate change under the same reason as follow. But why then This explanation is important to be talked about. Three things. One, because we say LGBT also because we cannot blindly compare which one is vulnerable about LGBT and the poor people. We are not immoral to say that one of it is way vulnerable. We say both of them is vulnerable. But as Pope, you need to strategically use your strategy. Therefore, when you remain populist, exactly, you need to pick the stance to assert your ideology about anti-poverty more, about anti-climate change more, and a comparative, taking the most radical stance, which is LGBT. But second, this is something that is important. When you think closing opposition still derivative from opening opposition, this important reason is something that is not existing in opening opposition. We say that when you give ultimate power to Pope, it is so immoral and dangerous. Because when the next Pope elected, when the next Pope is conservative, all the changes made by government teams also means nothing. That's why the best way to prevent irrational Pope in the future, exactly when you make the central of value into the majority, not into the perspective singular that made by the Pope. Last contribution in the closing opposition. Let's forget about Pope interest because affirmative might true, opposition is also might true. But it is something that is completely certain to be talked about. This debate need to be talked in a perspective about policy. We say when you ask Pope vote for yes for the policy, doesn't mean you can make the policy enacted because we see conservatism dominate the political arena. Therefore, it means two things. One, it means opening government and closing government benefit to save LGBT people means nothing unless they can prove why when Pope vote for yes, suddenly the policy being enacted, suddenly they can save everyone. Because we say we do not think that happened. Two, it means when you want to champion the idea of inclusivity, we also prove that the team that is inclusive exactly closing opposition. Because all of this point, we are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Opposition Way, for that speech. That was the end of the debate. Thank you. Now you can leave the breakout room and go to the debaters hall. After the judges done with the deliberation, we're going to call you. So yeah, thank you for the debate. Can the observers and